Do you believe in miracles?
Yes.
Good answer. This is a subject that is debated, though, today. Quite often, I'm a fan of those shows that I enjoy watching. I won't single out any channels, but scientific channels and history channels. And I think they're very interesting as to what they have to say. Unfortunately, there's even one particular that I've watched that addresses the different plagues and miracles of the Exodus. And it's interesting to hear some of the things that they have to say as to how they might have happened, how things might have happened through nature. Science is a gift, though, from God. Science is something that I believe, was given to us to be able to see into His incredible creative nature and abilities. How awesome that He is, and yet also how specific that He can end up being, the detail and everything. It's amazing to be able to see it. Science is a wonderful gift to us, but just like anything else, just like some of the most beautiful things, such as marriage, we can and we will abuse it. That's in our nature, to abuse anything that we're given, even the most beautiful things. And science also can be abused as well. Unfortunately, sometimes when you watch some of those shows, that I can see, if it's not said, it's almost implied that as they go through and they're explaining some of these, it's almost kind of assumed, or they're implying that God really wasn't involved with this. This was just simply a coincidence, and this is how nature basically did it. And that's unfortunate. To kind of overstep a line that I wish that wouldn't have been stepped over. Because miracles really are meant to glorify God. They're meant to be above nature and outside of regular creation. Things that aren't so much to be proven. They're meant to awe us. They're meant to make our attention go to God and be completely in awe of His abilities and what He can do and what He does. And that He does get involved with us in this creation. If you are a Christian, I think you have to believe in miracles. There's one miracle that it requires us to believe in, and that is the risen Christ. That Christ died and was buried for 3 days and then rose from the dead. That's not natural. That doesn't happen normally. That's a miracle. And today we're going to see there are 9 miracles of the 10 that we're going to look at, the plagues of the Exodus. And we're going to see the message that it has for us here today. Last week we had seen that the Lord's Word is completely alive, that He is a God. Not only His name itself says that He is a relational God, a close God, a living God, as opposed to the ones that are not living. They're of stone and wood of Egypt. But also He's a God of covenant that keeps promise and is very serious about that covenant, especially with Abraham. And that covenant also goes straight through to Jesus Christ as well. We also saw that in the covenant is where His grace and His mercy is. And that also is going to come into today's message as well. So the 9 plagues, what this is going to show is this is absolutely a judgment against the gods of Egypt, number 1. They had hundreds, if not thousands of gods. They had God for everything. Everything. And what He's doing here is not only is He is attacking these gods and showing that they are worthless. They do not live in comparison to Him. It also is judgment, almost an uncreation, you could say. In the creation account, like we've talked about, I think it's important that we assume that Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. I think that's very, very important. And I've been hopefully showing you why as we go through this sermon series. Another reason for that today is that Moses takes the creation account, and you'll see here in these judgments, in these plagues, it's referring back to creation as well. It's like an uncreation kind of a thing that's going on here. God creates, you see that there's water, there's land, and then there is the heavens, the sky, the cosmos. These three elements are also basically under attack as you see these different judgments here. In the first section, we're going to look at the first three plagues, so 1, 2, and 3. And then we'll see the second ones, will be 4, 5, and 6. And then the third, 7, 8, and 9, so in pairs of 3. The first section is going to have basically judgment against the waters. 1 and 2 we'll see. It says, stretch out your hands over the water to Moses and Aaron. The third one will say, it'll be an attack on the land. In the second section, all three of them are an attack on the land. And then the third section, in the 7th and 8th plagues, it says, stretch out your hands towards the heavens. The 8th one is also on earth. They're all interconnected. But it also attacks those living things that God created in the environment. He created the context, and He created the living things to fill them also. So therefore, we see, it's not all at once though. He could snap His fingers and then all just be gone. But He doesn't do it that way. He does it in a way that it shows judgment, and the purpose is for, number one, His glory, but also to inspire whether it be repentance, or ultimately choosing where you sit. What side are you on? His side, or in this case, Egypt's side. So, as we go through this, there's an intro to the section. In chapters 7 through 10 is what we're going to basically be looking at in the Exodus today. The intro is through verses 1 through 13, and a lot of this is going to be summary. I'm only going to put a handful of passages up on the screen. If you have your Bibles and you want to follow along, you can. But I'm just going to highlight the most key passages that we want to look at, because there's a lot of text that we're going through today. So, I am going to read this first part, though. It says in verse 1, And the Lord Yahweh said to Moses, See, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron shall be like your prophet. You shall speak in all that I command you, and your brother Aaron shall tell Pharaoh, Let the people go out of Israel, out of the land. It's interesting. Moses is like God. Aaron is the one that Moses basically speaks to relay the message to, and Aaron ends up relaying it out to Pharaoh and also to others. It's very interesting that Jesus does the very same thing. Jesus is God, and He ends up showing and teaching His disciples. They end up taking it also out to the world. Almost a communication line parallel that is shown here. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and though I multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt, Pharaoh will not listen to you. We've seen this also before. This is nothing new. Then I will lay my hand on Egypt and bring my host, my people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Egypt by great acts of judgment. Like I said, these are judgment. And the Egyptians shall know that I am Yahweh. I am the Lord. Anytime you see the Lord with a capital L, that's Yahweh. When I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring the people out from among them, Moses and Aaron, they did basically as what the Lord commanded them. Moses was 80 years old. Aaron was 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. The next section is, I don't believe I have that up on the screen, but it's verses 8 through 13. And this is where God tells Moses, He says, when Pharaoh says, he demands basically proof of power. When you come to him and he says, prove basically that you have power, that you are coming from God. Perform a miracle, basically, then. So he says, throw down your staff, and it'll turn into a serpent. He does so. And the Pharaoh ends up calling out his magicians. It doesn't say how many. It just says his magicians. It was probably, well, I can't say. It could have been 2, it could have been 10, it could have been whatever. But they came out and did the same thing. What's interesting, though, is that Aaron's staff, or Moses', either one, ends up consuming the other ones. What this is showing is the proof of power. Not only can he perform a miracle, but he is much more powerful than all of the other secret ways of the magicians of Egypt. No one is like Yahweh. And that is the first part, the first section that we're going to look at. The first 3 plagues starts with verse 14 in chapter 4. First plague is all the waters in Egypt turn to blood. Moses and Aaron say to Pharaoh, so far you have not obeyed. And Moses says, with my staff in my hand I will strike the Nile. The fish will die, the Nile will stink. Remember that the foreman of Israel said to Moses when they came out from Pharaoh, they said, "You have made us stink in the nostrils of Pharaoh," right? You've put a sword in his hand. He wants to kill us basically now. Well, now, the Nile, the very thing that brings life to Egypt, is going to stink. And this is an attack on the waters, like we said, as far as before. Shall be blood throughout all of the land, even in the vessels, the wood and stone. It's interesting that that's what the idols are made out of, is wood and stone as well. There's even blood in those. Here's a good example of basically where sometimes even with where they try to explain how God did these, and they might say, well, maybe it was algae or some sort of bacteria that came in through the Nile, turned all the water red. It's fine, I can take that. Maybe that's something that happened. But for it to happen right when Moses took his staff and touched it to the water and said that it'll turn to blood, turn to red. Okay, even if you want to say that's a heck of a coincidence to happen all at the same time. But even if you want to say, okay, fine, maybe that did happen just at the same moment. Even the water that had already been pulled out that was in jars, in wood and stone, turned to blood. He takes it beyond what you can explain in natural phenomenon. It's something that blows your mind. How did that happen? And then it says that the magicians did the same thing. I have no idea how that ends up happening, but they ended up doing the same kind of a performance with it. They couldn't cure the miracle. They couldn't turn it back to water, but they added to it. They did the same thing. And the Pharaoh's heart was hardened. It says, a full 7 days passed after the Lord struck the Nile, which this is hinting back to the 7 days of creation as well. So, second plague is the frogs. Heket was the goddess of life and fertility. I'm not going to go through all the gods, but every one of these things are attacking a god of Egypt. And of course, out of the Nile does come frogs, but not like this. God says there will be so many frogs, they'll be in your house, they'll be all over and around you, just in your life, it'll be miserable. And it says that the magicians did the same thing. They couldn't take them away, they added more frogs to the situation. And Pharaoh pleads with Moses to take them away. Moses can cure them, or I should say the power behind Moses. Moses tells Pharaoh, you say when. I'll let you say when this will all go away, when they die. And it says in verse 10 of chapter 8, so that you may know that there is no one like Yahweh, our God. Remember, Pharaoh in chapter 5, verse 2 says, I do not know Yahweh, and I will not let you go. Well, he's getting to know him very quickly here. They gathered the dead frogs in heaps, and now the land stank. So the water stinks. The land stinks. Pharaoh hardened his heart and did not let them go. Third plague is the gnats. Moses instructed, strike the dust of the earth from the land, basically. And this is what humans were created with, the dust, by the dust. The dust will become gnats in all the land of Egypt, on man and beast. Whatever this was that happened, doesn't sound like a very intimidating thing, right? You're like, the gnats came in. But it was something that was terrifying to them. I mean, the magicians couldn't even reproduce this, and they say, this is the finger of God. Terrified by this, whatever it was. The gnats that came on them. But Pharaoh's heart was still hardened. These three here are to show us, to illuminate that there is no one like Yahweh. That he is holy, completely separate from all other gods, all other beings. Nothing is like him. The tornadoes last week on our way in, even seeing them on TV, I think we can all agree that they are terrifying to even see. That's a level of destruction and power that you see is just overwhelming. Terrifying. That's just one little part of nature that God has access to, that he's over, that he controls even all of nature. It's amazing to think of the cosmos. I was watching a program just this last week of the cosmos and how it goes for infinity and just all of the thinking about all the galaxies and stars and all the energy and power that's wrapped up in that. And that he fills all of that. He's made all of that. And he also is so intricate to even have everything from the bacteria and atoms and things that hold everything together. God is over all of that. No one like him. He could have humbled Egypt in so many different ways, but he chose to do it through nature. I mean, in Israel, he ends up humbling through other stronger nations that come in, and militarily actually humbled them. Could have done that with Egypt as well, but he decided to do it through creation, to show that he is over it all, everything. Not just one God. He doesn't just control, say, the sun. He controls it all, everything. So number 2, second section, plagues 4, 5, and 6. The 4th is the flies. Swarms of flies will come on you, into your servants, into their homes. The land was ruined by flies. I will set apart the land Goshen, though, which is where Israel lived. Goshen means the temple of the sun, means drawing near. The temple of the sun is something, something that was worshipped by Egypt, absolutely. But it also means drawing near, which is very interesting because that's what God is doing. He is actually drawing Israel near to him, separating them from Egypt, though. They are not drawing near to Pharaoh. They are drawing away from Pharaoh and coming near to God. But I will set apart the land of Goshen where my people dwell. There will be no flies, that you may know that I am Yahweh in the midst of the earth. The presence of God is being highlighted here. There will be a division between my people and your people. Another way of interpreting that particular statement is, I will establish confirmation, I will establish redemption between my people and your people. I will separate your people from my people. They will see redemption, you will not. Moses warns before that, Pharaoh then says, I will let you go, but you must stay close to me. He's trying to hold on to what he believes is his, right? As God is separating them. You must stay close, though. And then he says, plead for me. Terrified by these flies. Moses warns me, says, no longer cheat. Quit lying, basically. In regards to your word, to your promise. It's funny, Moses is actually being salt and light in a very dark place, right? Don't lie. Pharaoh hardened his heart, though, again, and he didn't let him go. 5th plague, then. Egyptian livestock died. All the animals of the Egyptians were hit with a devastating plague. But Yahweh made a distinction between Israel and Egypt. In the 6th plague, boils came on man and beast. Moses took soot from the kiln, from the oven, and threw it into the air before Pharaoh. And it became the dust came over all the land of Egypt. Boils will break out into sores. The magicians couldn't even stand before Moses because of the boils on the Egyptians. The ones that challenged Moses, who was like God, couldn't even stand before him anymore. Separation, again, moving away. Pharaoh's heart was hardened, though. God is an excellent marksman here. He can end up picking out and choosing exactly who and what comes under wrath or blessings, one way or the other, in these plagues. It's fascinating that he can end up selecting out of all of that area. His people are protected, yet the others come under judgment. Some of you have told me stories about tornadoes where you had seen like a church, for an example, that might still be standing and everything else around it was devastated. Or even people that were actually left unharmed and everything around them, including their home, was devastated. Amazing. And you think of that and you're like, how can that be possible? Well, this is exactly the same thing what God is doing here. The rapture is something that a lot of people debate about, and I'm not going to get into that today at all, other than just saying the rapture is something where during the end times, where judgment is coming upon all of the earth, much very like these plagues and so forth, but that God will call his people up to him, basically, in heaven. And some people believe that will happen before this tribulation period of time, and some people believe it'll happen midway through it. Some people believe that it'll happen at the end, post-tribulation. Whatever your thoughts are on this, I don't think any of those are heretical or bad or anything. I don't think that that's priority, like main, most important theological points that we need to really have our Christianity based on or anything. But regardless, I think all theologians at least agree that even if it does happen at the end, where Christians have to go through that tribulation, those judgments, God has the ability and will protect his people from those judgments themselves. They might be light in that dark place, but he can select and protect those that are his, just like he did here in Goshen. He's an excellent marksman. The third and final is learning to fear Yahweh. 7th, 8th, and 9th. The 7th one is heavy hail. For this time I will send all my plagues on you yourself. This is to Pharaoh. And on your servants, your people, so that you may know that there is no one like me in all the earth. For by now I could have put out my hand and struck you and your people with pestilence, and you would have been cut off from this earth. It gives me goosebumps. Imagine if we're hearing that. But for this purpose I have raised you up, to show you my power, so that my name may be proclaimed in all of the earth. You are still exalting yourself against my people and will not let them go. But there is none like me in all of the earth. I could have cut you off from the earth. But also, I raised you up so that my name may be proclaimed in all of the earth. What a thought. Telling Pharaoh, I made you. Even though you don't think I'm your God, I am your creator. I gave you the ability to even be in this position. I gave you your power, your arrogance, and all of it, and pride that has come to it, is all basically a manifestation for this moment. And this moment is to glorify Yahweh to the world, to show his power, to show his strength, that there is no evil, no nation, nothing that is over him, not even close to him. There's a warning here then afterwards. It says, all who do not take shelter will die from this hail, heavy hail that's going to come from all, whoever feared Yahweh, it says, took their slaves and their livestock inside so that they would not be affected by this hail that came. The ones that stayed out were killed, basically, by those that took shelter and that feared, that took notice of his word and listened to it, were saved. Came under his grace, his warning. Thunder, hail, and fire ran down to the earth and struck down every man, plant, and beast, and tree, the living things that filled the earth. But there was no hail in Goshen. Pharaoh says, this time I have sinned. Yahweh is right, and I and my people are wrong. Plead with Yahweh. This has been enough. I'll let you go. And Moses said to him, as soon as I have gone out of the city, I'll stretch out my hand to the Lord Yahweh. The thunder will cease, and there will be no more hail, so that you may know that the earth is Yahweh's. But as for you and your servants, I know that you do not yet fear Yahweh, our God. See, without the fear of the Lord, there really is no true repentance. How can you really repent if there is no fear, if there is no understanding that there's a need for repentance? Otherwise, it can be just like a joke. You see Pharaoh, he's doing that. He's like, okay. Mercy, 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 mercy. All right, I'll let you go. I promise I'll let you go. I changed my mind. Got you good. over and over and over again. Pharaoh hardened his heart and didn't let him go. 8th plague is the locusts. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, that I may show these signs of mine among them, and that you may tell in the hearing of your son and your grandson how I have dealt harshly with the Egyptians, and what signs I have done among them, that you may know that I am the Lord," that you may know. So therefore, these things are done so that Egypt will know that he is Yahweh, Pharaoh will know, the world will know, Israel will know, that everyone will know who Yahweh is. Even into the future, that your sons and your grandsons, and that goes for granddaughters as well, for all of your children will know that I am the Lord. Moses and Aaron says, "How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me?" To the Pharaoh. Locusts will cover the face of the earth of Egypt. That's a lot. And they'll finish off with the hail left behind. All the trees and the plants will fill your homes. Pharaoh's servants advise him, and they say to him, "Let them go serve their God. Do you not yet understand that Egypt is ruined?" Pharaoh says, he brings back Moses and Aaron, he says, "Your men can go only." All right, fine. Your men can go, but that's it. Moses and Aaron were driven out of Pharaoh's presence. Interesting, that's what happened in Genesis 3, that Adam and Eve were driven out of the presence of God from the garden. The land was darkened. When the plague came on, then Pharaoh hastily called Moses and Aaron and said, "I have sinned against the Lord Yahweh your God and against you. Now therefore forgive my sin, please, this only once, and plead with the Lord Yahweh your God only to remove this death from me." So Moses went out from Pharaoh and pleaded with the Lord Yahweh, and the Lord Yahweh turned the wind into a very strong west wind, which lifted the locusts and drove them out into the Red Sea. Not a single locust was left in the country of Egypt. But Yahweh hardened Pharaoh's heart, did not let the people go. What's interesting here is this. That many locusts, that's a lot for the whole area to be darkened. A ton. They were blown into the sea. That has to be a big sea to take all of those locusts. Not one of them were left. So what I'm saying, this is not something that we're going to get back to in this sermon, but in a future sermon. This cannot be, the Red Sea cannot be a little tiny pond that's a foot high or whatever, or a marshland. It's got to be something huge to be able to take all the locusts that were just blown out of Egypt. It's a big area. All right, 9th plague, vital one, darkness. A darkness to be felt. In verse 21, chapter 10, 21, the Lord Yahweh said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand towards heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, a darkness to be felt." This was not just a visual darkness, this was even a spiritual darkness as well. This was something that was pretty overwhelming. So Moses stretched out his hand towards heaven, and there was pitch darkness in all of the land of Egypt 3 days. They did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days. But the people of Israel had light where they lived. It's interesting. 3 days is symbolic for completion. Complete. Jesus was in the tomb for 3 days, rose after the 3rd day, was in darkness, death. He also came as light into a dark place, light to the world, and that light was the life of men. Some parallels. So Pharaoh calls Moses and said, "Go serve the Lord Yahweh. Your little ones also may go with you. Only let your flocks and your herds remain behind." And Moses basically says, we need our flocks and our herds because we don't know what we need to sacrifice. And God won't tell us what that is until we're already there. So everything needs to go with us. Well, that doesn't make Pharaoh happy at all. Pharaoh says to him, "Get away from me and take care never to see my face again. For the day that you see my face, you shall die." And Moses says, "As you say, I will not see your face again." In Genesis 1, verses 1 and 2, it says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void. Darkness was over the face of the deep." It's interesting because it says the locusts will cover the face of the land. Darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. We are seeing God separating the light from the darkness. His people, so that they might become light themselves in a dark world. Not at that point yet, but he's separating his people from the darkness. Ever been made an example of before? No, I have. It's not a pleasant experience. Not something I recommend. Maybe you've seen someone else for the benefit of others that have been made an example for. Pharaoh is seen here in his futile efforts to defy and resist the God of all creation. There's no doubt that his arrogance and his pride is absolutely parallel to Satan. He puts himself as a place of being an enemy of God, unwilling to submit. His arrogance and pride is futile. He's clearly marked for destruction. He's destroying everything that he has. The most powerful nation in the world is being completely destroyed because of its arrogance and pride and refusal to submit to Yahweh. And all he's really asking for is for them to let his people go. He's not even saying for me to be your God. He just wants them to let their people go. So 3 concluding points here for today. And in the light of Thanksgiving this week, I think it's important for us to be thankful for these. These are incredible things that God has revealed here, and these are truths. One is that Yahweh is supreme over all creation. He is the supreme king. There's nothing over him. There is no nation that is stronger than him, no plague, nothing in nature, no tornado, no hurricane, no flood, no spiritual power, no level of darkness that is over him. He is supreme in power. The idols and gods are absolutely an allusion to captivity. By serving other gods, blind ourselves to the true God, to who he truly is. Put ourselves under gods that are really no gods at all. Versus Yahweh, the one who lives and who answers prayer, who acts, who's above all things. Not even the most powerful man in the world had a chance of defiance against him. Second is plagues are meant to glorify Yahweh to the world. Like I said, same as the book of Revelation. Those seals, the bowls, the trumpets, those things are all to be able to show, to give a chance for creation that has resisted God's rule as king to turn and repent, to give them a chance to be able to basically pick a side. And regardless, some will not choose him, even though they are in torment and pain. They still will not submit to him. That's an amazing thing in my mind. I can't understand that personally. But Pharaoh is perfectly the same in this situation. He will not submit to him, regardless. The fear is provoked to inspire to seek his mercy before there is no chance to repent. Yahweh wants to be known so that we can find his mercy and not be in his wrath. He's glorifying himself and revealing himself so that humanity can see where his grace is, where his mercy is, and not be in his wrath. There's a reason why he wants to glorify himself in this way, not just to Pharaoh, not just to beat up on a human, even if he is the most powerful in the world. It's to glorify to the world, to show who he is and where his grace and mercy is, so that they can choose which side they want to be on. We've talked before, Revelation ultimately says that God wins, no matter how bad things look. Choose a side. Which one? To be with God, to be of the world. Denying the miracles, the signs, and the plagues is to steal God's glory. It's like Pharaoh basically saying, this is nothing, this is no plague. My magicians can do the same thing. It's a coincidence or whatever. It's no big deal. But please take it away. Like you did before. It's dangerous. It's very dangerous. What we believe in determines our limitations. What we believe in is seen by what we follow, what we give our heart to. So what do you believe in? Do you believe in is a nation your strongest belief? Or government? Or a person, even if it is a leader? Are we devastated when the one that we want to be our leaders comes into power? Or do we realize that there is a stronger, a bigger king even than him or her? Do we put our faith in technology, in money, in security, in the comforts of this world? These are things that do give us relief now. But a personal God, Yahweh, the one who lives, is eternal. All of those others have limitations. They can only take us so far. Yeah, they do give us pleasure. They do give us comfort. They do give us relief. But with limitations attached to them also. There is no limitation if the God that you worship is Yahweh, the eternal one, that is over all of nature, all things. So 3, the final one. Covenant marks the identity of a human. In the covenant is where his protection is. Out of the covenant is where his wrath is. We talked about this last week, that all of us as humans, in rebellion from Genesis 3, are in rebellion against God due to sin. And what we deserve is his wrath. But by his grace, he reveals himself strictly so that he can illuminate where his mercy comes from. And say, this is where it is. This is where my hand reaches out to you. Take it. Take it. You have to choose, though. You have to make a choice. You have to reach out. You have to grab it. You don't earn it. Jesus did all that. He earned it all for us. He's the only one that can do that. You have to reach out. You have to at least take it. The overarching theme from the very beginning has been that God is moving to bring us back to how things were intended from the beginning. Harmony with him in his likeness. Harmony with God in his likeness. And my question is, are we embracing this? Are we embracing this movement that God has been doing? From the beginning, the Exodus is a step of what he is showing us that he is doing to bring the presence of God back to us. He's showing his power over all other gods, over all other nations, his mighty, awesome nature. I think that's actually something that's reassuring, knowing that your God is over everything, no matter how things look or bad they get, that he is over them all. And one day he will correct that injustice or whatever it is that we're dealing with. So the question is do we come into his mercy? How do we react to this revelation that he has given us? Next week we're going to look at really the highlight of what he does here and also how that fits in with Jesus. And that's an unbelievable text, but I think we can still see where things are going. And the place is that he's going to the place to bring us back to union with him. That's incredible. What a thing to be thankful for. So may we all come into God's grace to see that his wrath is not there to terrify, just to show off. His wrath is to illuminate his grace, to illuminate his love, so that we come into it. That's what he wants. From the whole time, he says in the Old Testament, why will you die? Why die when it's not necessary? Come into me. Come into where my grace is, where my love is. But we need to also understand what it is, so what the wrath is, so that we get directed to his love. Amen?
Amen.